Defenders of the Faith is the most controversial Judas Priest album art.
Can you believe that?
Fans either hate it or absolutely love it for its vintage aesthetics.
Adopt a Italian.
And so, as a part of our Defenders of the Faith 40th anniversary celebrations, let's first take a look at the history behind it and its creature, discover some of the bits you might have missed before, and then make a case for why it might actually be one of the best album artworks ever made in heavy metal. Here you go. Real quick before we start, guys, as always, please do not hesitate to comment on anything you hear or see in this video, and especially if you disagree with me, because the whole point of our Defenders of the Faith series is, of course, to start a conversation. But alright, let's do it. In order to work on the cover artwork for their 9th studio album, Judas Priest once again invited a Canadian illustrator, Doug Johnson, who of course worked on their previous record Screaming for Vengeance and will also be responsible for their 1986 album Turbo. And just like with Screaming for Vengeance, Defenders of the Faith continued introducing metallic battle creatures, yet this time instead of a steel eagle, we have a horned tiger-like land-assault warrior who, according to Judas Priest, is the Defender of the Faith himself, called the Metallion.
We're firmly on the ground, crushing continents, and so hence the Metallion. These could be the equivalent of Judas Priest Cabbage Patch dolls. I couldn't believe this.
We actually did feed Doug a bit of information as to what we wanted. Obviously, with an album title like Defenders of the Faith, we wanted the Metallion to be and to look like a Defender of the Faith. You know, what you'd imagine a heavy metal Defender of the Faith to look like, said KK Downing in one of the 1984 interviews. And interestingly enough, according to Rob Halford, he got the idea for the album's title from the picture of Britannia of the back of the 50-penny coin, looking how she was armed and set to defend the realm. And just like Britannia is the personification of Great Britain itself, the Metallion was supposed to be the personification of heavy metal, with all its power and might defending the genre from all its enemies. Which, ironically, after the release of Defenders of the Faith, there were plenty of, since it is a song from this record which will secure Judas Priest a place on the infamous Filthy 15 list. But going back to the creature, just like with the Hellion, this time around Judas Priest fans were also treated with a piece of lore placed on the back cover. A short poem about the Defender himself, rising from darkness where hell hath no mercy and the screams for vengeance echo on forever. Only those who keep the faith shall escape the wrath of the Metallion, master of all metal. And if we take a closer look at the script, we will see that it actually references several of the band's previous releases. Rising from Darkness, where Hell Hath No Mercy, describes the setting painted on the band's sophomore album, Sad Wings of Destiny. The Screams for Vengeance obviously references their previous album, and Those Who Keep the Faith, well, either proves that Judas Priest were writing lyrics for the future Bon Jovi record, or, you know, references the one we're actually talking about now. And in such way, Judas Priest actually tied together all three of the mystical characters they've introduced in their songs and albums by then, which, as we all know, there will be many of in the future. And I honestly cannot even imagine how exciting it might have been to pick up a brand new Priest album from a shelf of a local record store back in the day and see it introducing yet another creature rising from the depth of the rich Judas Priest lore. And by the way, just as we agreed in our community post, one of the next episodes on the channel will actually be about all of the creatures in the Judas Priest lore, and this episode is actually only the first in the series of us celebrating the 40th anniversary of Defenders of the Faith, which actually happens to be my favorite Judas Priest album. So here I just wanted to point out that only around 30% of the people who are watching my videos are actually subscribed to the Metal Pilgrim channel. So if you still haven't done so yet, and especially if this is not the first Judas Priest related video you're watching on this channel, please consider doing it right now. Let's continue building this amazing heavy metal community together.
To all the metal pilgrims out there, horns up to everybody. Stay hard, stay heavy, stay metal.
Just like on Screaming for Vengeance on Defenders of the Faith, Doug Johnson continued working in the style he was actually quite famous for by then, combining the simplicity and the traditions of naive art with the sleek, futuristic geometrical figures, pop art, and video game aesthetics. Yet most importantly, Doug returned to the concept originally created by Roslav Zhaiba when he came up with the Judas Priest logo we all know on Stained Class. You see, Stained Glass artwork was designed in such a way that together with its logo, it created a feeling of emotion, which since then has not been used, except for on the European cover of Point of Entry. Yet first on Screaming for Vengeance and later on Defenders of the Faith, Doug returned to the original symmetrical forms, which adds so much to the vividness of the picture. And if we pay close attention, the main lines on this cover artwork are drawn with a perfect 90 degrees angle, with the leg positioned exactly at 45 degrees, which masterfully creates the vision of the Metallion erupting up from under the ground, just like described in the verse on the back of the record, and which also explains the shattered pieces of asphalt flying from underneath his paws. Overall, this is the only Judas Priest artwork done by Doug depicting an upward instead of a downward motion, which is actually quite interesting. I, just like most other Judas Priest fans, actually always considered all three of the album artworks done by Doug as part of one trilogy. Even more, I think that you can look at it as a triptych, with Defenders being the centerpiece, and thus it actually balances the ensemble of the three artworks. Nerd. But if you thought that this was a bit nerdy, well, here's the nerdiest Judas Priest theory you will hear most likely ever in your life. I'll try to be quick. The Metallion is equipped with a couple of Gatling guns, which were used between 1862 to 1911, and is rolling on continuous tank tracks, which although also developed in the 1860s, were first successfully commercially produced in 1901, which means the Metallion was probably born sometime between 1901 and 1918. Just around the same time as blues, which was also originally formed around 1860s and which most music historians, including Rob Halford, do consider to be the grandfather of heavy metal, started spreading around the United States and beyond. And so one may believe that first hearing the sound of blues, the Metallion started growing into something much heavier deep in the depth of the underworld until it became heavy metal itself, only one day to come up and grace ourselves with its metal greatness. Yeah, I know. I officially out-nerded myself. But in addition to all that, there was another very important comeback made on this album artwork, the one without which we cannot even imagine modern-day Judas Priest. Defenders of the Faith is the very first official Judas Priest piece of artwork featuring the legendary Judas Priest cross after it was originally introduced on said Wings of Destiny. What? By the mid-1980s, Judas Priest cross was already accepted by most of the Judas Priest fans as the band's unofficial symbol. Yet despite its enormous popularity among the fan base, it was actually never capitalized on, neither by the band nor by the management. I actually don't think that there was any officially licensed product or a piece of artwork made by Judas Priest featuring that cross after said Wings of Destiny and before Defenders of the Faith. Although, of course, there were plenty of bootleg ones circulating around.
Can you believe that? Failed miserably.
But it was on the back of the Defenders of the Faith album, when introducing the Metallion for the very first time since 1976, Judas Priest officially used the pitchfork we know as the Judas Priest cross, which ironically replaced the letter T in the word Metallion, just like it will do exactly 20 years later in the Judas Priest logo itself. I have to to be honest with you, I always had a soft spot for Defenders of the Faith. It is this album which I got introduced to Judas Priest with. It is this album with which CD I was waiting for Judas Priest for gazillion hours under the hotel just to get it signed when I was a teenager, which by the way I did. And it is the album which for me personally is flawless from its start until its end. And yet still, when I first saw the album artwork back when I was a little kid, I felt like it was a bit too vintage for me.
Bro, what are you talking about, man?
Possibly because of the weird aesthetics which was prevalent at that time and which, as we all know, did not really last for that long.
Yes, that's true.
And so when I look back at it now, I realize how wrong I was. Yes, I actually believe that the Defenders of the Faith album artwork aged like a fine wine. It is the artwork which really made Defenders of the Faith stand out back in 1984 when it was just released. And it still does so today, possibly even more so than 40 years ago.
I think it still sounds very, very current. I don't think it would be too far off the mark if somebody came out with it now, you know. Really don't.
And in addition to everything, the Metallian helped Judas Priest take its live presence to an absolutely new level, as the band recreated the creature in metal in its entirety on the following 125 shows Metal Conqueror Tour.
How big is this thing?
Well, you see the claw there, I guess it's at least 30 feet, or almost. You've lasered a few people with that, and the horns are at least 15 feet in length, so all in all, it's a massive set, it really is.
And yes, we of course will talk about the tour which resulted in the band's permanent ban from the Madison Square Garden in one of the following episodes on the show, which I hope will come out in time, since we all had to spend quite a lot of time in the bomb shelters during the holidays here in Ukraine. And that's why this episode is coming out a little later than first expected. But anyways, today I firmly believe that the Defenders of the Faith album artwork is actually one of the best, and not only in the Judas Priest discography, but in heavy metal overall. With its vintage futuristic quirkiness, it was able to grasp the whole essence of heavy metal, its power and aggression, and its playful video game-like reality at the same time. And the years have shown that the more time passes, the more iconic this album is actually perceived to be by the fans. And not only because of its music, but also because of the Metallian himself. And I truly hope that this creature will find a way to make yet another appearance on one of the future Judas Priest records. Anyways, what do you guys personally think about the Defenders of the Faith album artwork? Please let us know in the comments. And happy 40th anniversary to one of the greatest albums ever made. Thank you so much for watching, guys, and we will prevail. Slava Ukraini!